morning.
Good morning.
Everything going well?
Yeah, man, it's going great. It's going great. Fall in North Carolina is beautiful. I'm enjoying it. So, how about you? How was the weekend?
Weekend was good. It's getting a little chilly here. Fall in Cincinnati is maybe not as beautiful as North Carolina, but we'll live.
Yeah.
Feels good. It's football weather for me, so I enjoy it. It brings back memories, but it's getting cold. So
yeah, sweater weather.
Yes.
Sweater and hot cocoa weather for sure.
Yes. For today, the conversation is preserving wealth while supporting aging parents. So preserving wealth while supporting aging parents, the idea of as your parents get older, trying to make sure they're taken care of while being able to continue to save for retirement, continue to save for your children if you have children, continue to do what you have to do financially for yourself and everybody. So it's a good conversation, a good topic to have.
Yeah.
So I'll ask a few questions, get some thoughts and perspective from your experiences, just some things you want to share and things you've seen. It's actually interesting because there was some data out there that I found that was specific to different ages and cultures, which I'll hint at a little bit, which can be found in the article that we posted about the topic. So, but diving in, first question: in your experience, what are some of the common financial challenges that families face when trying to support aging parents?
Yeah. The biggest one is long-term care. When a client has a parent, so statistically speaking, they say that 3 out of every 4 aging folks over the age of 65 will experience a long-term care event. How long that lasts, how expensive that is, how much of a burden that is varies. But when we think about long-term care event, there are 6 activities of daily living: eating, dressing, transferring, toileting. There's like 2 other ones. And if you are unable to do at least 2 out of those 6, you are eligible for long-term care if there's a policy, or it just means that you need the help. And so by that standard, the statistics said, and I was blown away when I first read them. The statistics said that 3 out of every 4 65-year-old or older will experience an event. And so those can be very expensive. Usually the options are, caring for that person in home yourself. Typically, if there's skilled nursing need, we're talking about having maybe a home care nurse come to the home, all the way up to assisted living facilities or skilled nursing facilities or retirement communities that have care, treatment, prescription kind of all wrapped up in the care. They get really, really expensive. And that is usually where the biggest financial burden comes. And so, having a long-term care plan, whether it's a policy or not, of like, who would be caring? Is there a rotation? What happens financially? Who's helping? Are there other siblings or other people chipping in? Are all really important to not draining your financial resources with aging parents. There's also a lot of things that can kick in on insurance and for the state, and different benefits that we have. And so having a plan for that is really important to not ruin your financial future caring for aging parents.
Yeah, and so thinking through long-term care specifically.
Yeah.
What are some things that you can do, and you being someone 30s, 40s with aging parents, what are some things that you can do to prepare for these situations ahead of time?
Yeah. So I'm going to go different plans, right? I think one of them that folks should really consider is a long-term care policy or a long-term care and life insurance policy for their aging parents. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there are 3 brothers with aging parents, and there could be a possibility that one of those parents needs care, but maybe the policy is not that affordable for the parent, right? So sometimes we look at policies and they are $5,000, $8,000, $12,000 a year, and it depends on the coverage amounts and how much you need. one of the ways that that burden can be carried is to take out the policy and split the premiums between the kids. So if mom or dad couldn't afford $8,000 a year, which it can be a lot, then what does it look like for all four of you to do $2,000 a year, right? So maybe a parent does two, each of you all do two, and you're contributing to and paying the policy. It really makes sense to do that when we're talking about a long-term care and life insurance mixed policy, because what we're thinking about is if an event happens where they need care, we can take the money from the policy and pay for the care. But if in the event they don't need care, right, they're the 1 in 4 that doesn't, or they, die peacefully or something happens, then there's a life insurance proceed that actually comes out to the beneficiaries, which could be the kids. So, I mean, I wouldn't set it up to say you could get, you would get the money back that you put in. You're really protecting yourself and your family from the financial burden of what could be care later on for your parents. But coming together in a group to pay the premiums or supplement the premiums for your parents can be a really good conversation to have and a really good way of planning in the future. So that's the first big one I really like from when it comes to like funding it. The second big one has to come with the conversations about where parents live and who picks up the bill for them financially as they age. So that comes when we're talking about parents moving in, right? Parents moving in. We talk sandwich generation a lot, and one of the big pros of being in the sandwich generation, if you have children and parents, is that parents can help you care for the children. But on the other side of that, financially comes, and socially, right? If parents move into the house, being able to pay for their additional expenses as possibly a dependent, right? So there's some ways that tax-wise you can actually claim them as dependents as they age, and that has to do with income and some other things. But it can be really helpful to decide between siblings, hopefully fairly, as fair as siblings can be, right? Where do parents move? And if you are one of the siblings that wouldn't be housing the parent, having some type of a stipend or monthly amount that you pay to the person who's actually physically doing the care to at least help lift the burden of caring for parents. So those are the big two, right? Coming together as a unit to maybe pay for the care. But then when it comes to other expenses, housing, clothing, food, the things that have to be cared for on top of whatever their incomes might be, can other siblings also chip in for the living expenses for the parents as well?
What advice do you have for finding a balance? So like you're having a conversation with your siblings about who's going to do what. But like, how does that conversation go? Any advice there?
Yeah. So you get into this really sticky situation of pocket watching, is what I'll call it, right? Where people tell you what you can afford and you're doing better, right? Depending on where your siblings are and relationship, hey, you can afford it, I can't afford it. Or, you get to the point where you could be possibly trying to collect from a sibling to care for a parent, like is really a situation you don't want to be in. So I am very cautious about the family dynamics and the money that's put into it and the emotional part of it. It can be troubling for a family, definitely. On the personal side, when we're talking to clients, we want to say we don't want to stop making contributions to retirement. So like when it comes to like your end of life plan, your retirement plan, your funding of your future, we not only we don't want to stop those contributions, but we don't want to tap the money, right? So even though your 401k might have an option for hardships where they don't charge you the 10%, and you could say, hey, my parent needs help, I need to tap that money, and you could forego the 10% penalty, it's really not wise to tap those dollars. And so I understand some people do, and you need to, and there's no backstop for that. But we really don't want to tap retirement accounts, 529 accounts, things that we're going to need to pay for. We don't really want to tap those. And we don't want to stop contributing. So if we've set up a plan or you're contributing, let's say you got a 6% contribution, a 4% match. So you got 10% total going to retirement dollars. That's really where our amount is. If in order to afford it, you have to scale back to 3% or turn it off for a while, we really want to see if we can find another way. That is that is putting your finances at risk to help. And although it comes from a good place, we fast forward 20 years and now you are in a dire straight position and you're looking for other people to assist you. And so how do we know if we can help? If we have our emergency fund and we're contributing to our retirement long term, and these are additional dollars, we want to take the dollars from discretionary things. We want to take these dollars from other places that are not base expenses and base savings, so that we know that we're not putting our financial futures at risk to care for parents. So that's really how we know if we have the money.
I think understanding that communication is the biggest part of it, and understanding at some point we may have to do this. If you're the parent, at some point this may have to happen, and coming together and being able to set boundaries, and making sure everybody can understand the expectations, understand who can do what and support what, and who has the capacity to do different things.
I think one of the most important things that we do for some clients is acknowledge that could be their future 10, 15 years down the road, right? We talk to folks in their mid-30s and we say, how's mom doing? How's your dad doing? Are they still together? When you look forward 15 years down the road, is there a possibility that you will be responsible for caring for them? And a lot of times that's the first time they thought about it. So they'll say, actually, yeah, it probably is me. I don't think it'll be my brother. I don't think it'll be my sister. Or they've thought about it a lot. And they say, I know it's going to be me, right? I thought about this. It's going to be me. And you say, okay, we know that. So let's start setting aside money for your mom now, right? So as we think about buckets, we think about travel buckets and college buckets and, the new home bucket, let's talk about a fund for your mom or a fund for your parents, depending on what it looks like, right? And a lot of times it'll be like, hey, my parents have split. One of them's good. The other one's not very good, right? And so we'll say, okay, this is the one that we are anticipating needing to save for. And we'll say, okay, that's $300 a month, $200 a month. Let's set aside an account specifically for them, either a saving account, if it's longer down the road, an investing account, and let's start putting money there because that burden is on its way and we know it and we can plan for it and we have the money to plan for it. So I think it's really looking down the road. If you're in the sandwich generation or you're in your mid-30s and mid-40s and you can do the math now to say it's going to be me or it could possibly be me, let's start setting aside money now. Worst case scenario, it's you need it, you have it, even if it's not all the money you need to supplement, it will really come in handy. Best case scenario, you don't actually need the money for that, and now you have other dollars saved that you can apply to some of your other goals. But we don't want to be left unplanned in that situation, because usually when we get to emergencies that are unplanned, even though we could have anticipated them, then we start tapping money that's really expensive, credit card money, retirement money, other goal money. So if we can if we just take a moment to say, how do we see our parents aging? Are we involved in that? Are we paying financially for it? And the answer to that is possibly yes. Let's start setting aside money now.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention or reference here was a graph or data that we found when we were creating the article around this topic.
Yeah.
Specifically, the Pew Research Center, they had some poll that they did earlier this year, and what they were asking was, how responsible, or do you feel responsible financially for taking care of family, in essence?
Yeah.
So the questions were, I guess they had you rate different answers, but the data is showing if you felt a great deal or a fair amount of responsibility for taking care of aging parents, taking care of siblings, et cetera, if you felt like they needed the support. And so what the data is showing as of earlier this year is that 55% of adults feel a great deal or a fair amount of responsibility for taking care of or assisting financially elderly parents if they need the support. But the piece that stood out to me, and we see it when we work with our clients, and it's always a topic of conversation, whether we bring it up or they bring it up first.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's a question that brings them to us, being able to manage and handle this aspect of it. 55% of all adults felt like they needed to, or they felt a great deal or a fair amount of responsibility. 68% of Black adults felt they needed to provide, or they felt responsible for assisting their elderly parents. So 55% overall compared to 68% for Black adults is a big difference. The graph also shows the difference for white adults, 51%, Hispanic, 57%, Asians, a little higher, closer to Blacks at 65%. But just understanding that culturally, we feel a bigger obligation to care for parents, family too. So looking at assisting siblings, the numbers are skewed higher for Black adults, but parents in general. And one thing I saw. So what are your thoughts here? Just looking at the data.
It makes sense to me. So when I look at the data, thinking about, I think there's cultural, and then I think there's need, right? I think culturally, Black communities, Hispanic communities, Asian communities have a heightened, can have a heightened emphasis on caring for others. Community, my money is our money. More community-centric views of resources. So that makes sense to me. The other side of the equation for me is need, right? That the racial wealth gap shows that the net worth number of most Black Americans is a lot lower than their white counterparts. So the average Black American may have more exposure to friends, family, parents, loved ones who really need the money, right? That a lower net worth usually means a lower emergency savings rate, which means that, folks are one setback away from needing help and not having help outside. The American social safety net is a pretty thin safety net compared to the rest of the world. So that makes sense to me. But it does come with a challenge of being able to sift through what you should help with and what you shouldn't help with. That's a really tough thing to sometimes come to terms with, is when to help and when not to help, how to help and how not to help. But this does make sense looking at the data, and I'm glad you talked about it. That folks are walking around with an internal burden, feeling like when I make money, I should share that money with the folks around me. And although it's altruistic and probably in a good place, there's not a lot of conversation about how do we set limits to make sure that you don't ruin yourself.
And I think the thought is, and I believe it translates to money in general, that sometimes there are no limits. But one thing that I heard, I think it was this week, somewhere on social media, was a conversation with retired NBA players, and it wasn't a question. What he said was, when he was talking to other Black players, or what he heard from Black players about what they did, I think with their first dollar, basically, right? When they first got paid, like, what did they do? And then a lot of the Black players did something for their parents, but then have the conversation with white players, it had nothing to do with their parents, about where they spent their money and what they did with it. And I thought that was interesting, because the next thing he said was, the Black players, they pay it backwards, and the white players, they pay it forward. And just understanding, yes, they do. There's a lot of nuance there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of nuance there. But it's just interesting. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things to talk about too, our tax system is made to incentivize people flowing down generations, right? So child tax credits. You can gift money to children and grandchildren up to the exclusion. 14,000, I think is what it is. Don't quote me, but you can give money down without tax. When you die, if you have any stock, it all becomes tax free in the flow down if it's non-qualified money. So like the tax system incentivizes wealth transfer down, but it doesn't really give you any tax break for helping up, right? When you buy your mom a house, or you help your mom with long-term care, or you help your brother get into college, like those things don't have tax breaks to them. So the tax system is built to funnel money down, and it really does. By not incentivizing, it does penalize helping out and helping up. But with the racial wealth gap, helping out and helping up a lot of times means that it's a necessity, right? It's a necessity for a lot of Black folks who come into money. If they want to help the people who've raised them, those people need help financially. So it is interesting. It is interesting, and it's something that we have to plan for, right? And it's an area of coaching and financial planning that these numbers show can be a very different viewpoint for different cultures, specifically Black and Hispanic cultures, and Asian cultures as well, because you can see them at 65% on helping parents, right? So some of these cultural prisms and viewpoints matter when doing planning, and I do think that's one of the reasons why when we meet Black folks and we meet Hispanic folks, we meet different ethnicities looking for financial planners, they want financial planners that look like them, because I don't want to have to explain how I view helping my brother get into college if I'm the first one through. Like I don't want to have to fight with my accountant because they're telling me that it's not tax smart to give money to my mom. One of the best quotes I heard, and then we'll move on, but you mentioned athletes. Tyronn Lue was a Laker who ended coaching the Lakers. He coached Cleveland as well. His first paycheck, he said his advisor told him not to help his mom with his first paycheck, and he shared, I'd rather be broke than be rich and my mom be poor. And that was, and he didn't work with that person, right? That wasn't the advisor that he started to work with. And so cultural context like that really does matter. But on the other side, as we're doing that, as we're helping family and helping friends, we'll keep coming back to it, because I don't want to leave it as a blanket term. We do need to know how to set boundaries and what the boundaries are, so that we can communicate that when we help. Like, hey, I'm helping you in this way. I'm helping you with this much. I can send you $400 a month. I can send you this much a year. I can help you with your housing. I can help you by buying you a car or picking up the card note. There are some things I can do to help, but that's really all I can afford, and not hurt myself and hurt my kids.
Yeah, I think the one thing you said, you don't want to have to explain how I want to support my family. I think it's more than just explaining it. Like, even if you explain it, that doesn't mean they understand it.
Correct.
And I think that's what we hear sometimes when people say they're looking for advisors that look like them. Like, I can keep explaining it, but like they might not get it. So
yeah.
So I'll pose a few takeaways. The big one, you want to have communication early and often with your parents. If you have siblings, have the communication with your siblings. Come up with some type of plan, some type of strategy, or even if you don't come up with a plan or a strategy, sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll lead to the creation of some type of plan, but just make sure people are all on the same page. You also want to incorporate that into your, I'll say, financial plan, but just incorporate it into any type of plan you may have as far as spending goes. How much you're able to set aside now is key. As with anything, if you don't start today and you try to begin it tomorrow, it'll be harder. It may be more expensive. It just may be more complicated. So incorporate that into your plan now, and it'll help you. It'll help you long term.
Yeah, I like that.
Last but not least, we have a question that we have been asking, specifically focused on money scripts. And again, it's not a question, it's a statement. And how these statements work with our money script assessment. They ask you a list of questions to gauge how you view money, and then they provide you with a score. After we ask ourselves these questions for about another 50 weeks, we will be able to come up with our own money script score, right? But today, the statement, people get rich by taking advantage of others.
Mm.
And you can either 1, strongly disagree, all the way up to 6, strongly agree.
I find this one interesting. People get rich by taking advantage of others. I disagree. I find that people typically get rich by providing value of some sort to others. I can think of instances where people get rich by taking advantage of others. I also feel, specifically in this cultural context, like today, that there's a lot of stories about rich people who take advantage, and it gets Hollywood glamorized in a way that I think makes it feel more prolific than it is, right? Like, as soon as a company falls from grace, there's 3 documentaries showing how they stole money and became billionaires while doing it. So I feel like the news and the media really glorifies people who take advantage of others and get rich. Call it Fire Festival, call it the Theranos documentary, call it WeWork, call it FTX with, all those people. Documentaries pop up within a month on Hulu after it happens, and it's all over the news. And so I do think that there are people who get rich by taking advantage of others. I think the bulk of the people that I meet that are wealthy, even past rich, who have amassed wealth in a way that's continuous, do it by helping others and by adding value to the people around them.
I disagree also. There are those that aim to get rich and do get rich by taking advantage of others. But I agree with your statement that there's other ways to get rich other than taking advantage of others, and people do that also. Finding value, being able to add value is a big way to do that. So, yes, I disagree.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that before we wrap?
No, it's nuanced. The questions, and they're not questions, the statements are nuanced.
Yeah.
As us as humans grow and evolve, ideally your stance on these statements will grow and evolve. So for today, I disagree. And again, it's very nuanced. I mean, we could talk about any of these statements, and maybe we will at some point talk about any of these statements for a long, long time. And I can think of some people that I would specifically invite to the conversation about people getting rich by taking advantage of others, because it is nuanced and I've heard different views, but I disagree. Yes, there are people that do. If you can, the word that keeps coming to my mind is exploit, which I don't want to say. If you can find value and add value and be able to find an efficient way to bring your value to market, people will pay you for that. Also understanding there are people that exploit that and make money. But there are also people that exploiting is taking advantage, but there are also some people that just take advantage. So
we'll drop the article in the link. Protecting your retirement when caring for aging parents.
Until next time, have a good week.
Peace.
If you enjoyed that video, be sure to subscribe. If you want to learn more about how we serve our clients, visit our website at www.alchemistwealth.com.